What's up guys, this is Nathan, ThatAlbumReviewerGuy, and I'm here with the first episode of my new series, Review Roundup. I know it's not the most original name for a series like this, but if I think of a better one later on, or if anyone else has a better idea for a name, then I'll change it in the future. Anyway, this series will feature me giving my thoughts on albums that came out during the last 3 months that I didn't make a video for. I'll be doing these in order of release date. So with all of that out of the way, let's get on with my first review roundup. We're gonna kick things off with Alice Merton's debut album, Mint. Alice Merton has had a few singles prior to this album, including No Roots and Lash Out, which were both on her No Roots EP, but they also appear here on Mint. This German-Canadian-English singer-songwriter has definitely made a name for herself over the past year or so. I figured I'd give her debut album a shot, and well, I think it's okay, but just okay. I listened to this album 3 times, and I just couldn't get completely into it. I can't deny the fact that she puts effort into her music and that she cares about what she's doing. That being said, I also think a lot of stuff on this album sounds very similar. Quite a few of these tracks just feel formulaic, and they kind of blend together for me. Songs like Funny Business and Speak Your Mind just repeat the same words, and they don't offer much. And I was never a fan of No Roots, and that song did not grow on me with more listens at all. However, I do think there are some standout tracks on this album. Learn to Live is a good energetic opener, Two Kids is another solid fun song, and Lash Out is my favorite single off the album as it has the most to offer in my opinion. I think the instruments and vocals on this album are all done well, but at the end of the day, I'm kind of divided on this album. I think quite a few tracks are just okay, including the closer, Why So Serious. Overall, I give Mint a 6 out of 10. I'm divided on it, but I think there are a couple more positive aspects about the album than negative. We go from one singer-songwriter to another with Heard It in a Past Life, the debut album from Maggie Rogers. This album has more of an electronic overtone to it. I'd even say chillwave in some regards, like with songs such as Say It. Of course, there are still instruments on here, and for the most part, they're pretty solid. Maggie's voice is nice and soothing as well. She delivers some really good vocal moments on this disc. When everything comes together, it all sounds so mellow and calm. But there lies my main problem with this release. At points, her voice can be too soothing and the music can feel too relaxing. It comes off as dull and boring in spots. I have a hard time differentiating several tracks on this album because they just blend together for me. I'm also not a fan of the chorus in songs like Say It, On and Off, or Give a Little. They don't grip me at all, and that's a shame because the beats and instrumentals are quite nice. This album does have some gems though, like the very catchy and upbeat Overnight, the riveting closer Back in My Body, and the absolutely beautiful lead single Light On. That song in particular really showcases what Maggie Rogers has to offer in my opinion. Overall, I give Heard It in a Past Life a 6 out of 10. I see the potential here, and this album comes very close to hitting the mark from time to time, but it just barely misses it each time. I'm gonna start this one off by saying that I'm a Papa Roach fan. If you remember my review of their 2015 album, Fear, you would remember that I thought that album was pretty solid, and it was even one of my favorite releases of the year. While my opinions on that album have changed a little bit, I still think it's solid. I haven't heard Crooked Teeth in its entirety, but I've liked a good chunk of what I have heard. This album though, well, I wanted to like it. I really did. But that just didn't happen. This is Papa Roach's 10th album, so naturally, they would want to try something new at some point. Over their past few albums, they've been toying around with electronic and pop elements. They bring them out even more on Who Do You Trust. There's a lot going on here. You have these weird boat horn sounds on Maniac, a very sappy and dull pop track with Problems, and the intro of Elevate really reminds me of an Imagine Dragons song for some reason. There's also a punk rock influenced track called I Suffer Well, and a bootleg Rage Against the Machine song called Renegade Music. Like I said, there's a lot going on throughout this album, and it's very inconsistent. It has some good points though, such as the engaging opener ironically titled The Ending, and infectiously catchy tunes like Come Around and Feel Like Home. When the title track was released as a lead single back in October, I was hoping the rest of the album would be better than that. And I must say, I'm kind of disappointed in Papa Roach. I understand that they wanted to experiment, but this album just feels so watered down and uninspired. It feels like a bit of a cash-in to me. Overall, I give Who Do You Trust a 4 out of 10. I hope this is just a fluke from Papa Roach and that they'll be able to bounce back from it with their next release. I was originally going to skip this one because I figured it was just a covers album, but since it's officially slated as Weezer's 12th studio release, I figured I'd talk about the Teal album. When the band released a cover of Africa by Toto last May, I thought it was just going to be a one-off single. However, it actually spawned an entire album of covers. Weezer have reached the point in their career where I feel like they don't really care what they put out anymore. That's why they've been releasing albums very frequently lately, and they've been a mixed bag. We knew we were going to get the Black album this year, which by the way, stick around because we're going to cover that one today as well. But the Teal album just came out of nowhere. But you know what? That's okay. I personally like surprises, especially surprise releases. I think it's a good tactic because it's nearly impossible to leak an album that just comes out of nowhere. Now on to the music. I have to say, this is quite a wide selection of covers that Weezer has chosen. You have mostly 80s pop and new wave, but there's also a classic rock track, a 90s R&B tune, and there's even a heavy metal cover on here. By the way, having Brian Bell on lead vocals for the cover of Paranoid was a good call, because I don't think Rivers' voice really fits the Black Sabbath style. There is a bit of inconsistency with all the different styles Weezer tackles on this release, but at the same time, they pull off a majority of these songs fairly well. This album is pretty fun to listen to. I'm not going to call the Teal album a gem or anything like that, and I'm really tired of hearing their Africa cover. I'm not even a fan of the original song, but you can tell Weezer had a lot of fun with this project, and that works in this album's favor. Overall, I give the Teal album a 7 out of 10. I don't think I'll be revisiting this one too much, but I still think it's solid for what it is. Honestly, I'd even be okay if they made another covers album down the road. Why have I not heard of Astronaut before? What have I been missing? If their first album and 2 EPs or anything like this release, I've been doing myself a huge disservice. If you're also unfamiliar with Astronaut, they're a post-metal band from Lowell, Massachusetts, and they formed back in 2012. I saw a couple other reviewers were talking about this album, so I figured I'd check it out, and I have to be honest here, I wish I checked it out sooner. Now, I don't listen to a lot of post-metal, which is something I should change, because who knows what else I'm missing out on. The music on this album is so atmospheric and beautiful. I love atmospheric music. Anything that takes you on a musical journey and is very spacey is right up my alley, and I love exploring that kind of music. Astronaut takes post-metal and incorporates some shoegaze elements into it, and then you get this 9-track, 47-minute hidden gem of an album. The instruments sound great, there are a lot of soaring guitar riffs on this release, and I think Brett Boland has a very unique and ambient voice. He's very melodic in his delivery, and his higher vocal range is a thing of beauty. There are a couple of drawbacks with this album though. I get lost in the music both in the good way and the bad way. Some of the riffs and vocal melodies sound similar, and it's hard to differentiate tracks occasionally. There is some overlap on this disc, but even that isn't a huge problem. Overall, I give Astronaut an 8 out of 10. If you haven't heard this yet, I highly recommend that you do so. This is some fantastic atmospheric post-metal. So the story of how I stumbled upon this band is actually pretty funny. One day I was on Spotify and I was looking up the song Mother Tongue by Bring Me the Horizon. In the search results I found another song called Mother Tongue by a band called White Lies. For some reason I was intrigued by the band name and album artwork, so I figured I'd check out their newest album. This is the first time I've experienced their music, so I'm definitely not an expert. However, I will say that their sound reminds me a bit of The National, which makes sense seeing as how they're both lumped in the post-punk revival genre. This album has a very chill but also fun style to it. You get some laid-back vibes from songs such as the closing track Fire and Wings, but there are also some catchier and more energetic songs like Tokyo and Denial. The album opens kind of weak in my opinion with Time to Give, but there's excellent build-up in the closing track Fire and Wings, so it ends on a much stronger note. This trio works well together as everyone always feels like they're perfectly in sync. This album has infectious rhythms and catchy hooks. There are repeating lyrics in a lot of the choruses throughout this release, but that's not that big of a deal. Overall, I give 5 a 7.5 out of 10. The album does lose me a bit, and the repetition can be a bit much, even if it's not too big of a deal. That being said, it's still a good album to chill out with. Heavy metal and progressive metal legends Queensryche are back at it again with their 15th studio album, The Verdict. This is their third album with Todd LaTorre on vocal duty, although on this album he also recorded the drum parts in place of Scott Rockenfield. I've enjoyed a bit of Queensryche's material, both old and new, but at this point I have to be honest, their style's getting a little stale for me. I feel like a lot of classic metal bands fall into this habit of doing the same thing over and over again for 30 years or so, which is why a lot of them fall off the face of the earth. I'm not saying that keeping the same style doesn't work for some bands, because it does, but at the same time, a bit of change, even if it's a small one, can help offer a different element to the music. This album opens strong with Blood of the Levant, and there are a couple of other really solid tracks on here too, like Propaganda Fashion and Bent. They all really get me invested, but a lot of the songs are just there. There's nothing bad or extremely boring on this album, but it's kind of like vanilla ice cream for me. It's okay, but nothing special. Todd LaTorre's vocals are always spot on, and the guitars, drums, and bass sound solid, but this album just feels like a been there, done that type of thing, and that's just my opinion. Overall, I give The Verdict a 6 out of 10. I think Queensryche are still a talented and legendary band, but if they're going to keep pumping out new material, it might be time to implement a new trick or two. I told you guys we would be talking about the Black Album on this episode, didn't I? Well, here we go. This is the second and hopefully last album Weezer released this year. This came out only 5 weeks after the Teal album. Then again, the Black Album had a slated release date, whereas the Teal album was a surprise release, so I guess that can be forgiven. But let's be honest here, the Teal album was better. At least that was fun. This is just there. It starts off with a lot of energy and Can't Knock the Hustle and Zombie Bastards. Those are both very fun tracks that were previously released as singles, so I've had a little more exposure to them. The album immediately falls off after that. You have boring songs like High as a Kite, Living in LA, and Byzantine. That song actually sounds like elevator music. Then you have songs like Piece of Cake and Too Many Thoughts in My Head, which are pretty stupid in my opinion. I know Weezer's lyrics are usually quirky, but I'm So High on Cookies? Really? And the album ends with the absolutely abysmal California Snow, which was also featured on the soundtrack for the 2018 movie Spell. That track features some pretty cringeworthy rapping from Rivers Cuomo, and I'd like to forget that song exists. Overall, I give the Black Album a 5 out of 10. I wouldn't say I hate this album as much as I would say that I don't really care about it for the most part. It's pretty forgettable, and if you really want to listen to one of the new Weezer albums, I recommend giving the Teal album a spin instead. While She Sleeps was one of my favorite discoveries of 2017. I was blown away by their song Silence Speaks, and later on I listened to the entirety of You Are We, and I love that album. I still haven't checked out their first 2 albums yet, but that's definitely on my to-do list. When the lead single from So What, Antisocial, was released back in October, I wasn't sold on it at first, but I was still looking forward to the album. After listening to the album all the way through a couple times, I can say that my opinion on that song has completely changed. I love Antisocial. It's an energetic album opener, and I can relate to the line, "I'm not antisocial, I'm anti-bullshit," as a guy who's a bit of an introvert. Anyway, that track kicks the album off in a big way, and throughout all 11 tracks on the release, it never slows down. Laz kills it on vocal duty, Sean and Matt absolutely shred throughout this whole disc, Aaron's bass work is solid, and Sav absolutely pulverizes his drums. There's also some piano on here, which is played by Matt Welsh as well. This album also features some electronic elements and audio snippets, but they're not oversaturated, and I don't feel like they overstay their welcome. This album is 48 minutes of metalcore goodness. From the energy of Antisocial, to the crushing heaviness of Haunt Me, to the sheer emotion on the closing track Gates of Paradise, especially listening to the harmonized vocals in the outro of that song. While She Sleeps absolutely nailed it with So What. I was headbanging to every song on this thing during each listen, and I had a blast listening to it. Overall, I give So What a 9 out of 10. I'm starting to become a full-fledged While She Sleeps fan, and if you're not familiar with this band, do yourself a favor and check them out. If you're into metalcore, you won't regret it. Thank you guys for watching my first review roundup. I'm gonna try and do these every 3 months. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think about any of these albums. You can follow me on my social media links in the description, and check out some more videos on the gimmick on screen. I'll see you all next time.